What's up guys, Metal571 here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Audeze LCD-4. This review has been a long time coming. This is actually like the third unit I've heard of this. One at Can Jam last year, and this is the second one I'm evaluating at home. This one belongs to Audeze themselves, and so thanks to Audeze for setting this one down. So this is a open back 200 ohm 106 millimeter planar magnetic headphone. Yes, that's a very high impedance for a planar, and it takes a lot of power, which I'll get to in a couple minutes here. But this is a sound review, and we're going to start with the bass first. I don't even know where to begin with how good this is because this bass in this headphone is probably about as good as you're going to get in just about any headphone. I wrote here in my notes, I really waxed philosophical on my notes for this video. To be honest, I think I wrote here, I have not yet heard bass in any headphone with this level of dynamics, complete transparency in terms of detail, and completely unending sub bass all at the same time. And that's basically what you get here, not to make a pun. But you've got the flat bass response on these. It goes out forever. There's no end to it. You can EQ it to whatever you want, and it'll just do whatever you want with no complaints, no harmonic distortion, nothing. It just does it. So actually this kind of makes this headphone into the ultimate bass heads headphone as well, which, as some of you know, I do prefer the Harman response. So naturally the bass that you get on these is, or that these can put out, is really awesome, but it doesn't need a lot of a bump. I actually only needed 1 or 2 dB of a shelf at 100 Hertz to get these to my preference. You don't even need a shelf. I don't think some people are going to require that at all. And that's probably at least partially because the dynamics that this headphone can produce in the bass is very, very good, especially for a planar magnetic. And so as a result, the overall bass level is not really, it doesn't sound as light or as flabby as some headphones do. It's very tight. It's tighter than a lot of planars. And it's partially because this driver is just insanely capable, which is going to be a theme, as you'll see. Mid-range. So here's where the standard Audeze LCD sound comes into play. You've got a little bit too much 1K for me personally, because yeah, Audeze doesn't have like a sort of a dip here. It just actually has a lot of the time has a hump. It sounds like there's a hump, and so voices are a little forward, but not in the upper mids, in the middle of the mids, around 1K, between 500 Hertz and 1K. And so I brought this down by about 3 dB to get it to sound a little less, I don't know what adjective to use for this, but there's just too much energy between 500 Hertz and 1K for me personally. But some people may not mind that. It adds a lot of body to voices. And if you like the warmth of voices for female or male vocals, I think you may not need to mess with this part of the EQ, and you can probably ignore it from my EQ that I'm going to recommend here. But unfortunately, there is still the 4.5K, 4K, 5K, something like that. I'm hearing similar things actually to what Tile originally reviewed a lot of the Audezes as. There's just a withdrawnness to the upper mids or a / low treble. It's kind of in between depending on where you define that frequency, but somewhere between 4 and 5K, something like that. There's a bit of like a cave there, and it needs to be filled in properly in order to sound what I would expect. And this is more noticeable when you A/B with like the Sennheiser 6XX, for example. I know that's not even close to the same price range as this headphone, but the tonality of that headphone is such a reference for me that it's very important to consider no matter what I'm reviewing. It's always comparing it to this mid-fi Sennheiser stuff. But other than those quibbles of the FR, the resolution is insane. Like, if you like listening to metal, as of course I do as well, then electric guitars are going to sound a bit withdrawn and pushed back. But when you apply the EQ to scoop the mids a little bit and add this missing area in the low treble slash high upper mids, you could say, then they come alive, and you can still hear the resolution is superb here. And I directly compared it to the HD 800, of course, which I still own as a Soundstage reference mainly. And it was pretty clear to me that the resolution in the mid-range just was not quite on the same level with the 800. This thing is really clean, super clean. One of the highest resolution headphones I've tried so far. The treble here. So this is an interesting region, especially for the LCD-4, because the resolution is, once again, unreal, completely insane. But the tuning is strange. Like this one in particular, and your Audeze might vary because there's still some variation between drivers, at least so far in my experience with the LCDs. Although it's gotten better, as I've heard, with time, but there's still some. This one in particular has got a lot of air treble. So actually, when you listen to it without EQ, it sounds very shiny, and it's not like a 10K thing. It's like a beyond 10K. It's almost like there's somebody put a boost starting at 10K that just went like this all the way out to 20K, and it's bumped by. So I pulled everything down around 10K and above by 4 dB on this one, which is pretty significant. But the good thing is that the ability for this headphone to resolve absolutely tiny details, and the ability for the driver to extract detail above 10 kilohertz is unbelievably good. And after you equalize that region down to make it less annoying for genres like electronic music, you can really hear that it just absolutely precisely tracks the music the way you would expect for such an expensive headphone. And that is the story, most of the story with the treble, although it's bizarre. And once you take down that air treble, you start to hear a little bit of a 6K peak going on as well. Obviously, everything I do is compared to the Sennheiser 600/650. I have the 6XX right now with the treble because that tuning is just almost absolutely perfect for me. But this headphone clearly just blows away the resolution of almost everything I've heard so far, especially everything I've heard at home. I think the only things that have ever come close are actually indeed the HD 800 and probably the HE1000 V1, which I had for a while, but I never actually reviewed it, so hopefully I'll get another one of those eventually. It's just breathtakingly detailed, and maybe so detailed that I actually have in my notes here that this is super revealing of compression artifacts. If you actually listen to MP3 that's less than 320K, you really might start to genuinely get annoyed by the compression artifacts this headphone can extract from the upper treble frequencies. And so I don't even recommend listening to anything other than FLAC or at least 320K MP3s on this thing, something of equivalent quality, because it will show every single flaw. But thankfully, although it is too bright and sheeny and has a little bit of 6K peakiness, the technical ability, like I'm saying, the clarity is absolutely unbelievable. And after EQ, it maintains it like 100%. So if you're not scared of using EQ, you can really make this headphone do just about anything you want, which is kind of similar to the way the HD 800 works as well, which needs a lot of EQ, actually more EQ than on this in the LCD-4, which is a plus for me. And so that's the bass, mids, and treble. Soundstage, I compared back and forth quite a bit between the HD 800 and the LCD-4, and honestly, I don't think the LCD-4 was that much worse, thankfully. The Soundstage width on the HD 800 still just destroys just about anything that's out there, and is still indeed better than the LCD-4, that's for sure. But I feel like after you get to a certain point of being able to image well and having a sufficient width, it's good enough. And almost no other headphone is going to be as good as the HD 800. And of course, someone's going to comment K1000. I know, but it's out of production, so that's why I don't usually mention it. And that thing is bizarre in its frequency response and whatnot. Maybe I'll eventually get one for review in like 10 years or something. That's a difficult headphone to get a hold of, but I'm getting off track here. But the takeaway with the Soundstage is, yeah, HD800 is still wider, it's better, it's bigger, but the LCD-4 is still excellent imaging and soundstage width that I wouldn't really hold that against it, unless you absolutely have to have the widest soundstage possible. Then it makes sense. But you'd also want to prefer a brighter sound signature, as the LCD-4 is not like an HD800 at all in frequency response, natural frequency response. So, what about deal breakers? What about the other stuff with the LCD-4? Well, first of all, you need a very powerful amplifier for this thing. Actually, Audeze recommends 500 milliwatts at 200 ohms minimum, which is significant power. But honestly, I think that you need something like on the order of the THX 789, which of course I have. And with that amplifier, I'm still running a normal listening volume of about half volume on the maximum gain being fed single-ended on this thing by a topping D50, and with the -4 dB preamp on my EQ. So that's a lot of juice. Oh, and that's with the balance connection, by the way. Single-ended on the LCD-4. I actually, one of the reasons why I upgraded, by the way, from the Magni 3 that I had before was because I put this headphone on the Magni 3 and I was finding myself on the volume dial at like 2, 3 o'clock, and the bass didn't sound like it was holding together as well as when I finally got the 789 and plugged it in here with the balance cable and everything. It sounded cleaner. I wouldn't say huge, enormous, impossible difference. One headphone becomes another. My amps have never been like that to me, but I felt like the Magni 3 was really straining to drive something like this. So if you're not going to use the LCD-4 balanced, a very powerful amplifier, I'm not totally sure you're going to get the most out of it. So that's something you have to consider. Next of all, this is heavy. I mean, Audezes are pretty heavy headphones, and this is something that I think Audeze is trying to address with the LCD-4Z, which apparently sounds very similar to this, but weighs quite a bit less. So hopefully I can get one of those in as well for review soon. That would be great. But yeah, the original LCD-4 is very heavy. It's got a classic heavyweight Audeze build with all the magnets and the huge drivers and the wood, and this thing's probably gotta weigh something like 700 grams or whatever. I'm not sure the exact spec. I'm sure Audeze has it on the website. Since this is mainly a sound review, you guys can Google it. But even though I don't normally get fatigued by the Audeze stuff, as some of you know, I actually own an LCD2 Classic, which is right up there, which is quite a bit lighter, I think, than the LCD-4. Wearing this thing for about an hour and a half straight actually I started to feel it in my neck a little bit on this one, and that's unusual because normally I don't have any issues with headbands. I don't have any issues with weight with the Audezes, so that's something that you should also keep in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, there's still a fair amount of potential variation. The community, I looked at one of the threads on HeadFi, I think it was, and people posted their graphs, because you can get the individual measurement of your serial number for the LCD-4 from Audeze, and multiple people posted the graphs for their LCD-4s, and there was some clear variation still in existence here for this driver. Now, I don't want to rag on Audeze for making headphones that are completely different unit to unit, but for the ridiculous $4,000 you're spending on this headphone, you should have pretty close driver matching from unit to unit even. Drivers are matched, I believe, within a dB or half a dB, I hope, for something this expensive, but unit to unit may have some more significant variation than that. So that's something else you want to keep in mind when you buy this headphone. So the one demo unit you hear at Can Jam or wherever may not quite match the same as the one you end up ordering, but the good thing is you can equalize these things like crazy. They take great to EQ. Very, very clean driver. I asked to get the frequency response of this serial number, but no response from Audeze on that, just to be honest. All right, so what does this all mean? What is my conclusion for this thing? So I want to start by saying here, with EQ on, this is one of the rare headphones that, like, when I was demoing this, not only was it hard to take off my head, but after all the stuff I've heard in this hobby, after attending multiple meets, about to go to my second Can Jam finally now, there are moments that I'm listening and I just stop everything I'm doing, and I just have to sit there and say, wow, because this headphone is probably the most fun I have ever had with any headphone. It is just so much fun to listen to, and the combination of the bass, the incredible resolution in the treble, and the excellent still soundstage is just that good. And I just can't believe how excellent this headphone is after EQ. It is so awesome. And you guys know me, I am super critical of everything that comes into this townhouse and gets tested. And this is just awesome. I really love this headphone. Of course, the price is unbelievably insane as well. This is a $4,000 headphone new. I don't think anybody should be charging that amount. That's just my personal opinion. If I had to price out headphones, I think I would cap all the pricing at about $2,000. That's where I put this, which is not too far off from where these run on the used market. And I do believe they come with a 5-year warranty as well, so I don't think you have too much to worry about that is transferable. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's still the case. But that said, you have to keep in mind that, and Audeze says this, it takes about 4 weeks alone just to finish these ebony rings on here of wood. It's real wood, 100% real wood. This is a real carbon fiber headband, and the drivers take a long time to manufacture because they are insanely thin. It's apparently, I believe Shankar has said that they're actually thinner than some electrostatic diaphragms, which is really unbelievable. So it takes very, very long time to manufacture, though. I think it's around 1 week, 2 weeks, something like that for the drivers. So, this is not a mass-produced headphone. I believe it's made to order, and so that's part of why it's so expensive, although it's still very expensive and probably doesn't have to be quite that expensive in the future. So I hope, and I said this in the Q&A I did with Audeze, I hope that eventually this kind of driver technology can trickle down and eventually become more mass-producible in the future. But I believe it may even be just a materials engineering issue at this point. To make this diaphragm for this thing is very, very difficult because the film is just so thin, and that's part of why apparently the resolution is so good. Now, despite the wild price tag, another thing that I want to put in here in the conclusions is I still wouldn't use this without EQ. There's a 1K hump. It's forward where it probably shouldn't be in the lower tones of the vocals. There's a lot of treble above 10 kilohertz, at least on this unit, which was annoying and too bright, quite a bit too bright for me for some genres. There's an obvious for something dB or more recession at 4.5K, depending on what you prefer. So the frequency response it's not that impressive compared to the Sennheiser 6XX. What is impressive is the incredible bass extension, but the tuning of the rest of it doesn't really sound that fantastic to me, if I'm being honest. It's really the detail that this headphone can extract and the excellent soundstage it still has that makes it such a winner. And those are the things that I tend to value a lot if you haven't seen that many of my reviews. And another thing that's kind of funny is the Mobius, believe it or not, of all things. It probably has the most precise treble tuning of any of the Audezes I've heard. Some of you really like the Sign, I know as well, the close back on ear. And that had some excellent tuning with the cipher cable, in my opinion, as well. Very, very, very accurate. And the Mobius sounds very good with default EQ and the treble. But this still it just doesn't match that tuning, which is really kind of unfortunate. But again, I want to repeat this, that I've never had more fun listening to a headphone. Never, never, never. Than on this thing so far. So for those who have the means, the proper amplification, an equalizer, ability to deal with the weight, consider it. But I'm not sure if I would pay $4,000, or anybody should pay $4,000 for this thing. But if you have to have it brand new, hey, it comes with gloves too, by the way. It's my favorite headphone I've heard so far overall, 100%. But I have not reviewed the Stax 007, 009, Vocal Utopia, Hyphamin Susvara, or ZMF Verite yet, so I think we'll see what happens when those come in. Until then, this is the king. Thanks, guys. Hope this was a fun and educational review. I know it was kind of long, but I mean, when something comes in and just really just blows me away, and I want to talk about it for a little while. So I hope this helps you guys make a decision on the Audeze LCD-4. See you guys in the next review.